Hey everyone, and thanks for joining. We're just going to wait another couple of minutes here and let some more people file in, and then we'll get started. All right, let's start. So hello, and thanks everyone for joining. I am Lisa Gerber from Business Development for M&E at PacketFabric, and I am joined today by Dave Ward, our CEO, and also Carole Girdley, our Chief Strategy Officer. We also have a special technical guest joining us today, Ken Gray. Ken is our Senior Director of Market Research and Analysis, so welcome, Ken. Just a little note, I want to encourage everybody to stay until the end, not only for what these awesome folks have to say, but to be in the running for one of our $100 Amazon gift cards, so stick around for that. But without further ado, we are here to talk about our exciting news, the merger between PacketFabric and Unitas Global and all that it signifies. So like I said, I'm in business development, and I know that my organization, for one, really sees this merger as bringing all kinds of exciting new offerings to our customers. But objectively speaking, too, there are really some clear and compelling ways that we directly complement each other, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So, Dave and Carole, you both have been key drivers of this vision for the past 18 months and have really propelled it into reality. So let's start with you. Tell us, Carole, I'll start with you. Why was this such a pivotal move and an important win for the industry?
Oh, thanks, Lisa. Listen, just let me say we're so excited about this merger announcement, and really it's so timely. The market is so ready for disruption in the networking industry. We've seen enormous change through storage and compute, through the launch of cloud providers, and we've seen the same with SaaS providers. But networking has been slow to change, and we think that bringing these two assets together is really a very powerful combination and allows us to now take the whole concept and offering for NaaS and bring it all the way to the customer prem by the addition of last mile services. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But I'd love to just give our CEO, Dave Ward, a few minutes to just tell you about some of the thinking behind why we're doing this and how it came about.
Thanks, Carole. Thanks, Lisa. Apologies, everyone, if my voice isn't as strong as normal. I've got a little touch of the COVID going on, so I asked Ken to join us just in case. But look, I'm super excited about bringing the two companies together because having been in the industry and working with a number of folks on this webinar today towards software-defined networking, the two portfolios and the two software platforms in particular really enable the culmination of software-defined networking and create a programmable internet. The goal here is to fundamentally change the way enterprises can use the internet. And through Unitas Global's software platform of Nexus, which we'll get into in just a second. I don't want to steal all of my own thunder or Carole's thunder coming up in a little bit. But building on top of that platform and the transit network and the peering that we're going to tell you a lot more about, and then adding on top PacketFabric's converged real-time on-demand connectivity bandwidth latency control platform is the culmination of software-defined networking towards a programmable internet. It's been a goal of many folks in the industry, many engineers, many business leaders across the industry towards this. These two companies coming together in one as PacketFabric really enables that vision, creates that vision, and puts a business behind it.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Nexus platform, but so let's talk about that for a minute. So what other specific value does each company bring to the other? Carole. Sounds like you're muted. Carole muted at the top there. Dave, want to take this?
Sure. So really Unitas Global adds the notion of really that access, IP, line into the industry and into software networking. So that extended reach is not only access, but it's also the transit piece I mentioned and IX. And these pieces were not a part of the PacketFabric to begin with, but it's really what the team at Unitas Global, some outstanding engineers. Grant Kirkwood is leading constructing that network architecture. He's well known in the operator community. Patrick Schutt is the CEO of that company, and he's been building and has built 3 companies in a row, really focusing on that extended reach of that access piece. Now, the great piece about both these companies is that they were automated. PacketFabric was focusing on high performance, real-time, on-demand connectivity bandwidth control, but Unitas Global had been building an automated network as well, connecting that access line into their backbone. The access capabilities that Unitas has is in 170 countries of the world. We'll get into more numbers in just a second, but really that joint culture of automate everything between the 2 companies is key. Second, or third, I guess, bullet, sorry about that, is really that notion of IP transit. Unitas Global absolutely has just a fantastic transit capability in their network and in their operational excellence. And so adding more layer 3 on top of PacketFabric's layer 2 really just, completely builds out that entire enterprise network that's necessary. The Nexus platform itself, which I absolutely love from Unitas, is a design, price, and order platform delivered as a SaaS. And really what's different about this intellectual property or about this platform is that design piece. It allows a customer not only to, hey, I want to build an enterprise network in 170 countries or however many that may be that an enterprise needs to get to, input the addresses, set some design policy. And that design policy isn't just give me the lowest cost. It could be, I need this redundancy. I need this bandwidth. I want to exclude these carriers. I want this particular attributes of my network. That design piece is wholly different from any other access line platform that's there. So you get the design piece to architect your network. You get the pricing piece so you know all of the policy variables you put in, what that price is going to be, and then you can click order and go. And that Nexus platform, built towards performance and scale with thousands of telcos around the world, is really one of a kind and very unique software platform itself. That last mile piece that I mentioned earlier and extending the reach, and again, I promise we will show you some numbers in just a second, that notion of adding the last mile and an edge device on-prem, and then having that automated real-time on-demand by the PacketFabric Converge platform, that allows and is the only service available to an enterprise on the internet where they can control from on-prem to everywhere they want to go. Private data centers, hyperscalers, SaaS, storage clouds, security clouds, UC clouds, etc., and have not only connectivity control, but real-time on-demand bandwidth and latency control from the edge to everywhere. So the combination of these 2 networks and these 2 technologies is absolutely brilliant. Love where we're going with this. But the set of tools, last on this slide, the set of tools and support that comes with it, it's very much the same culture across the 2 companies of customer first. But the operations and management tools, the ability to understand the latency of a path, the ability to absolutely understand where in the network any issue may be occurring, what the attributes are of the different components of those links, is something that no other network or network operator provides. So all of these pieces together really kind of are more than just additive at bringing the 2 companies and the 2 technologies together. Both of them are platform first. Again, the Nexus platform from Unitas Global, the Converge platform from PacketFabric. Bring those 2 together, and you bring these attributes of the network that's there, and it's a full real-time on-demand layer 2 and layer 3 service for enterprises.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dave. Let's do a little mic check on Carole. How are you doing? Can you hear us?
Can you?
You're back. Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
All right.
Can I just add one point to what Dave said? I just wanted to make sure, and maybe he said it when I dropped, but I just want to make sure everybody knew that what's pretty interesting about that last mile platform is actually the addition of this thing we call NIDS, the network interface device, which we're putting at the edge of the network. So having a NID, it's not just about adding last mile connectivity, it's about putting that NID out there so it's fully programmable in the same way that PacketFabric services are today. So it just gives us that added functionality in a really exciting way.
Yeah, it kind of lets us also meet our customers wherever they are, however they want to meet us. So obviously it extends our control with the NID all the way out to their premise. But in some cases, you just have to use broadband. You have to use a public network. And so the Unitas transit and peering brings that to us if you must use public for the last mile of your network. It allows you to join to our private network in the least friction way possible at the closest access point. So it allows us to approach our customers with a private where you can network, which is what they're used to doing, but public where you must, with services to cover any eventuality.
Great. And so to add to all of this, right, a few months before the Unitas merger, Unitas actually acquired iNAP. Carole, can you say a little something about iNAP and how that fits into the broader offering?
Yeah, I mean, iNAP, it's really good that you mentioned that because I don't know that it had a ton of attention when that was announced. But when Unitas brought in iNAP, it sort of put them in a new bracket, right? I mean, this chart's pretty compelling, but when you see that there's over 5,700 IP peers, as well as 60 plus internet exchanges, and for those of you who follow CADA, you can see, bumps them to the 80th position globally. This is just huge, right? In terms of their capacity to perform both IX and transit services, and shows you the extent to which their layer 3 network is super, super important. So for us, that brings another really important asset into the portfolio and another set of product that will then be automated in the same fashion that the current portfolio is.
Ken or Dave, any other thoughts on that, on this slide?
It also obviously increases the reach of our fabric itself in the most intelligent way that we can grow. By knitting our points of presence together, you can see that we're now able to serve a much larger geography than we did prior to the merger.
I'm super proud of this slide. I promised numbers just a minute before, and these are just some of the key numbers that we take a look at. I believe this puts us fully into the #1 position as a network as a service provider. It's an incredibly impressive network around the world with cloud access on-ramps in the critical regions. This is just really an important way to understand bringing all these networks together and really what it means to the industry. We're not just a small startup. We're a really important and really potent service provider, and the only one providing real-time on-demand connectivity, bandwidth control, and latency services. I know I've said that a few times, but nonetheless, the network as a service option on top of a network this size is the only one on the internet.
Yeah, so I mean, what we're looking at here, this is obviously just a hugely expanded, more robust network. It's unique. Why now? Why is this such an auspicious time for today's market and today's landscape? What's going on that we are responding to?
Look, we are finally hitting the point where NaaS is at a new inflection point, right? There is such a need that businesses have today for flexibility in their network, in the same vein as hardware and software. And it's long been known, but it's been really slow to come to fruition. So looking at how businesses are running SaaS in the cloud, serving that need over a static network, it just isn't meeting the requirements. So today you've got multiple cloud providers, multiple data centers, all adapting to these changing needs and demands, and the traffic patterns aren't predictable. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. So more and more, we see this spaghetti bowl of cloud on-ramps and data center interconnections that have been put together on this kind of one-off basis over many years, and it's increasingly not only costly, but inefficient. So we see that the business needs are really dynamic. And in order to meet them, they need a non-static offering. And that really is what NaaS is about.
I think that, sorry about that. Lisa, just to follow up on what Carole mentioned, it's critical right now because the way that telcos and cablecos present network services and options to enterprises is completely static with no control. There's absolutely nothing that enables a business to get out of their incredibly sucky services they have now and get to something modern that's represented like it's a platform from the cloud, whether it's the pay for what you use model or it's the ability to control the network. That just doesn't exist on the internet. So the auspiciousness of the time now is that this finally has brought this technology together and really can outperform what traditional telcos and cablecos are offering to create a business service that's built in the cloud, built to connect to the cloud, built to connect it back to on-prem. And it's been a ton of work by the entire industry to get to that software-defined internet, but this is the culmination of that.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, has COVID accelerated things? How has that affected this move?
Well, it's changed the whole notion of remote work, right? And so those sort of hub and spoke models, those kind of static footprints have all changed enormously and required businesses to respond. And it hasn't been easy for them to respond in good order. But the compounding effect of a movable workforce and changing business modes with economic uncertainty and challenges has put a bigger spotlight on companies who really need to pay much more attention to their cost structure and who are now taking a relook and a rework at the cost structure for networking. So those things together have really led to a renewed interest and a big opportunity for the NaaS industry to come through and deliver the potential for these customers.
They totally shifted IT too as well, Lisa. I mean, what the pandemic essentially did is force IT to scramble and adopt a lot of things that had a 5-year adoption. Everybody had a 5-year business plan to eventually get to cloud. Some people were looking at SaaS and already starting to embrace SaaS. By the time we were a year into the pandemic, cloud was saturated. Everybody was moving into cloud for both their applications, their day-to-day business. The SaaS uptake was dozens of applications, if not hundreds, for large enterprises. The IT department was delivering services largely from the cloud. Everything that you used to get from a local IT department was being delivered from the cloud. Mm-hmm. The one thing that didn't shift was the thinking about networking itself. And the pandemic forced a rethink of that as well, with the cloud access part being the thing that dragged people forward into thinking about network as a service, as a lower cost way of getting to the cloud. But eventually starting to look at the entire WAN estate as the new mode of work kind of settled in. Digitization was changing where all their data was going to be. Projects were accelerated. The whole landscape changed, and now people are looking at the entire WAN estate, not just how they get to the cloud, but how they connect the remaining core aspects of their business to each other, the new data centers where they've offloaded their private cloud to. So we are shaping a product that is designed not just to get you to the cloud, but to bring all of the agility that you're used to getting in going to the cloud to your WAN itself, and helping you transition that last part of IT, which used to be WAN management and WAN planning, over to a provider like PacketFabric.
Hey, Ken, so dovetailing on that, let me ask you a leading question. Why doesn't the old hub and spoke model that Carole mentioned really going to work for this? Is it because the unpredictability of bandwidth? Is it because the location of the app you're going to use has changed, the dynamic nature of IT? How does the network architecture and the needs, as you just described, actually come together?
Well, you actually gave some of the answer in the question. The ability to do the resource planning that used to go into a long-term enterprise WAN plan kind of went out the window, and continues to change as more and more parts of the enterprise become digitized, as new cloud partnerships are formed between one enterprise and another, or between a provider and an enterprise. Their data gravity kind of shifts around, and their needs shift around at least year by year. And so the ability to plan how much bandwidth I need to a particular location, or where I'm going to hub that bandwidth through, and how to manage the costs of my consumption, all just went out the window. You can no longer plan a WAN the way you used to. It needs to be virtualized, just like your compute consumption and your storage consumption needed to be virtualized. And that's essentially what we're doing. Now, it's a private network that we offer, but what we have done is allow you the flexibility to change the connectivity to suit your needs. Not if you were able to know where your endpoints were, we give you the flexibility to increase or decrease your bandwidth on demand. Obviously, you can optimize around term if you'd like to. We also add things that you never got in an older WAN. We give you the ability to burst, even if you know what the endpoints are going to be, so that if you have periodic uses of your network that you know of, you don't have to always buy the maximum capacity that you're going to use. You can just go on a tonnage basis or a freight basis for those short periods and still pay the normal term for a lower bandwidth rate, which is your normal 90% utilization rate. It's an optimization you didn't used to have through a traditional provider. For the fact that your endpoints are changing all the time, we offer you aggregate bandwidth or flexible bandwidth, where you can just buy an amount of bandwidth that you think you're going to need within a term in our network and move the endpoints around. We really don't care where you're connecting on our network, and you can optimize your spend in that way, or you can grow into it if you're a startup and you don't know whether you're going to need 10 gigs or 100 gigs. You can negotiate in between and kind of grow into that bandwidth. All that flexibility wasn't there for you before. And we've also eliminated all the operations in the middle. We're doing that for you, right? All of your backbone routers and stuff like that, that's us now. It's a private network. We control it and you control it through us down to its very bones. And you get visibility down to it as well, just like you would in your own network. We bubble that up through to you through our API, through streaming telemetry, however you want to consume it.
So network as a service, or NaaS or TruNaaS, it really is kind of the only response to all of those factors that you all just talked about, right? Carole, I want to go back to you for a second. Do you think that the market up until now has appreciated the value of NaaS up until this point, or has it kind of been misunderstood or diluted?
I think it's a hard question to answer, in that you have to first have a notion of what is NaaS, and I don't think there is a clear notion of NaaS. Unfortunately, it's been a bit of a buzzword, like SDN, and there have been so many companies who've come out with offers in this arena, and really for most people, it boils down to some assumption that it's a pricing model that mirrors what they know for cloud consumption or SaaS. And unfortunately, like, that definition of itself is just not only incomplete, but just really in no way, shape, or form does justice to the way that we think about NaaS. So for us, like, we've tried to sort of redefine the space, and for us, we call this TruNaaS. And TruNaaS is actually a very specific set of functionality that we think is required to deliver a real network as a service. There are a number of key elements that go into it foundationally, which are things like, cloud native and being able to, be fully programmable from the onset. And of course, a very important one, being wholly agnostic in the market. And by that, I mean agnostic with respect to data centers we serve, with hyperscalers, with network service providers, and even hardware vendors. But more importantly, there are three key elements of TruNaaS. The first really is the consumption model, which we've all talked about. But let's be clear, the consumption model isn't just, I want to buy by the month, or I want to buy by the year, or the 3 year, whatever the term is. It's more than that. There are a lot of different models that are responsive to businesses in different ways, like an aggregate pricing model, which we can come back to in a minute. But I just want to make it well known that it's a little more interesting than just a simple consumption metric. The other two key components are self-service, which self-service very much gives customers complete control over their network using programmable APIs, so that they can automate very directly. And then lastly, and certainly not least, is automation. And again, often thought of only in the provisioning sense, we mean end-to-end. So we're talking about pricing, ordering, billing, fulfillment, all the way through customer service. And those are the basic tenets of PacketFabric's, mission from its early days. So we bring that really into a full offering of services across all of what was the Unitas portfolio, as well as PacketFabric's.
The automation also carries beyond just what we have integrated into our platform, but it surrounds our platform as well for its consumption. It's entirely API first platform. So you can interface with it through its API. And in case you don't want to do that, we obviously offer you a portal that you can use or you can use through an agent. But we also wrap all our API in Terraform for all the people who do want to programmatically control the network and mix in network control along with DevOps or SecOps or anything like that. That we've everything that we expose to our API, we also wrap up in Terraform so you can consume it that way. So it's that sort of viewpoint on how we should automate, not only internally, but externally, that we bring. And there's another aspect to this as well, and that's intelligent network design. Even though we have a cloud native platform, we think an industry leading one that provides all of this flexibility to our users, we apply it to an intelligent network design, our own fiber optic network sourced from multiple different providers. We offer you high availability at every turn, not only built into the network itself so that it self-heals for any break or outage. We offer you the ability to attach to it in multiple zones, the zone model that you're used to, for instance, in compute through an IaaS provider for compute. So you can apply high availability as well at the edges to where you connect, whether it's at the cloud or in a DCO or on-prem. So we build our network the way that high-end enterprise network planners would have built their network with all of the fail-safes in from the beginning. And that is a business decision that we made that makes our platform different and what we offer to our customers different.
Yeah, so speaking of that, so you just mentioned as a business decision and what we're offering to customers. What are some of those, specific sort of market trends that are crying out for this level of flexibility? Because obviously this is all about flexibility at the end of the day, right?
It is, and I think we've covered a lot of the trends. I think we know them, right? Whether it's the developments from COVID, whether it's economic uncertainty, whether it's need to manage your bottom line, whether it's SaaS or multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environments that are dictating, increasingly flexible requirements for network services and capacity, or even flexible pricing models. I think they're all converging and they're all growing. But maybe the more interesting story, Lisa, is to bring one straight out of what you see in media and entertainment. I know the customers you work with have very specific needs, and it'd be great to hear one of those.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's interesting. For sure, COVID, I mean, everything you said about COVID rings true for M&E in a very big way. I mean, it's caused the industry to completely not completely, but decentralize a whole lot. You have teams, you have artists kind of working all over the world, which is, increased by the tax incentives and production tax incentives to shoot across different states. You've got virtual production, which depends on connectivity and the sharing of files throughout production, as opposed to just, it used to be at the end. They need that high bandwidth. They need it now. Broadcasters are, you talk about aggregate bandwidth. They need the type of bandwidth, the scale that they want, when they want it, and where they want it, and to choose and, where that goes and have it be incredibly nimble. Plus, obviously, the move to the cloud has been a huge part of it. So, and I also just think in general, there's this huge uptick in what I like to call the operational tempo of M&E and of production, and they need it now, and they need it in a short timeline, and on their kind of budgets and with their scalability. So yeah, I mean, all of that means more flexibility for sure and more automation.
I think that's interesting to hear, because you work in an industry in particular that's pretty risk averse and mandates security and is usually not a first mover when it comes to technology adoption. And yet you're seeing that there's value that's been both appreciated and willingness to use those services. So I think it's
Yeah.
a great proof point.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a perfect storm of what's been needed to sort of nudge the industry forward, for better or for worse. And so we are definitely seeing that it's really going in that direction and that there's a real need for this. Dave, do you have any thoughts on that? Because you also, you have been working with me and M&E for a while now.
Well, a couple things that I wanted to add just on the use case. So look, if it's virtual studios, studio as a service, virtual production, all of that is now being driven out of the cloud. And kind of just sitting on this one particular slide on how is NaaS actually solving this? And we talked about what makes NaaS critical. You think about some of the other folks that are trying to really attach themselves to the notion of NaaS and how it wouldn't work for media and entertainment. If it's just gear as a service, which some vendors are trying to do as NaaS, that doesn't solve the media and entertainment problem. If it's just build a tunnel-based network over the consumer internet, that doesn't solve this use case. If it doesn't include connectivity all the way to the stage, that doesn't solve this problem.
It's got to be all the above.
It's got to be all the above. And so this has been part of the confusion about network as a service and how it actually meets these the demands of media and entertainment. In particular, again, back to what you said, the virtual production piece, not only are the artists everywhere, but it's often out of a multi-cloud environment. And the bandwidth and the flexibility, just what you've been talking about for the last few minutes, has to follow the actual workflow of production. And that multi-cloud workflow of production requires flexibility of the network and not a static topology and something that can be controlled through APIs. And so all of this ties back together because the market trend isn't really necessarily just by a vertical segment, whether it's media and entertainment or Fiserv or healthcare or whatever the case might be. It's really driven by these use cases and need to have multiple cloud-based services or use of a multi-cloud workflow for different tools that are available. In the media and entertainment case, it can be ingest, and then it could go to another cloud for transcoding and another cloud for distribution, just to keep it really simple. That requires big flexible pipes between all these clouds to move that data between it. So the flexibility and the use case tie really clearly in the media and entertainment, but it also ties together the capabilities of this NaaS platform and what enables us to satisfy that market.
Right, and I don't want to spend too much time on M&E, but I will say that folks stages, production stages where the content is actually shot are starting to think about connectivity and infrastructure before they build the stages at this point. So now it's going into we're starting to see that as these new stages go up, which is happening quite a bit, that thought about how am I going to get this kind of a NaaS into my space is happening up front as opposed to down the line. So it's being prioritized more and more.
And I think that
and Lisa,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I call on Ken.
I think it also dovetails into our ability to extend the fabric further than just the normal places where you would meet us if you were only cloud centric. Once we start looking at individual industries like M&E, we're building out to where they are, right? Not just to the clouds that they want to serve, but actually to the places of business that are central to their operation. And that's part of our neutrality really is we don't make you come only to our data centers or come only to our cloud to use our networking services. We go where you are, and the ability to reach out through that last mile just makes that story even more powerful for us as we move forward.
Carole, do you want to jump in? Because that brings us really nicely to the next thing I was going to say, which is the edge to everywhere, which is, exactly, Ken, what you're talking about, and is also the title of this webinar. What do we mean by that? What do we mean by the edge to everywhere, Carole?
Well, I think you both described it valiantly. It effectively means that we can reach any customer wherever they are at their doorstep. And that's so important when you think about how you are going to extend the service on a ubiquitous level. Because until now, these services have been available up to the data center, right? And that's great, that's an enormous market, but if for an enterprise, that's not sufficient. That doesn't cover all of their endpoints nor all of their business needs. So this addition and the edge to everywhere allows us to service every customer where they are in the way that they need to be served. And the brilliance that you've heard in the NID approach, by having a programmable device at the edge, again, that lets us provide an entirely different set of services over what was sort of perceived as probably a liability, which I would argue is now an asset.
Dave, thoughts on this particular concept of edge to everywhere?
So I think we've covered it quite a bit, but it's really, as Carole just mentioned, getting from on-prem to everywhere a business needs to go. And that is really connecting agnostically into hyperscalers, the service clouds, SaaS, and the internet, and those pieces to really reconstruct not only how an enterprise does IT, but how an enterprise can get off MPLS VPNs, how an enterprise can get off consumer-based circuits and have control themselves. And the edge to everywhere for us really means you don't have to own, manage, and operate your own equipment. So DIY is dead. You don't have to hand it over to a telco cableco with a static topology and no control over that. That era is dead. And now it's really this notion of self-control on a managed and operated network, all the way from on-prem to everywhere you need to go.
Mm-hmm. Ken, kind of riffing off that for a minute, thoughts on what to keep in mind, things to keep in mind for those looking to optimize their WAN?
Well, it gets back to not making, as Dave was kind of hitting on, not making sacrifices where you don't need to make sacrifices. You're used to having a private network and having those controls, and we're trying to bring that back to you instead of you having to use an overlay of a public network where you don't have as much visibility. Private also has a couple of advantages as far as application performance goes. Gateways and gateway devices, which normally are around the edges of the public network, lead to variable application performance. And we've shown that in the past in some of the work that we've done and published with Amazon about how private connectivity leads to greater application throughput or goodbut. So those are things to keep in mind when you're planning your WAN. And then just the idea that just like an infrastructure as a service provider can provide you the compute that you're going to need when you need it, network as a service providers are trying to get you to think the same way about your network services. That's our job, is to provide you what you need, when you need it, where you need it. And there's been a little bit of a drag on thinking in enterprises around that. And that gets to Dave's idea about moving beyond the ownership model where you have to own and operate the network yourself to get those things. We provide that to you, fully programmatic, full control, full visibility, but with the pricing that and cost controls that you really never had, the agility there that you'd really never had in a traditional WAN.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, so I have one more question for the group. But before I ask it, I want to invite folks to put questions. Oh, I think nope. Put some questions in here if you have any. We'll try to get them answered in the Q&A. But for now, what's next here? So Carole, where is PacketFabric with this today? Can a customer, take advantage of all these services today and here and now? Where are we with that?
Yeah, well, so let's be clear. We did just announce our intent to merge, so we're a little early in the product evolution, but we're hoping to get that closed in the next month or two, and you will see announcements coming from us as we know more about the availability to be able to provide a broader scope of services to both the existing and Unitas and INAP customer base. So until then, we're absolutely thrilled to sell you all the services in the portfolio and have you grow with us as we grow into them.
I second that. Other thoughts on that?
Well, the two companies have been working together now, actually for many, many months, being able to work across the line of the two companies to a certain degree in a commercial motion, as Carole just mentioned. And so also what we've been working towards is making sure that we can have reachability across each other's networks. And so those are some of the first things directly in front of us, and then the integration of the technology itself.
Well, fantastic. It doesn't look like we have any questions here in the chat. But, you know, we've all sort of had our ear to the grindstone and are aware of questions that are out there that folks might ask. Ken, do you have any, you've done some webinars where some really interesting questions have come up. Do you have any that you hear more than others?
Well, the most interesting thing to me is getting beyond just the cloud only conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We engage first with customers around their cloud needs first. That goes back to your question about the effect of the pandemic as well. It dragged people into our shop more or less as they were looking for cloud-based solutions. And when we've had an opportunity to engage with them, and they discover, oh, I can use this for so much more than I thought I could use it for. We get a lot of traction there. The onus is on us to make that even easier going forward, I think, for our customers to just see like a packaged WAN solution, mm-hmm. a flexible layer 3 connectivity solution. We already offer a flexible layer 2 solution to them, and with our cloud router, for instance, making it look like that for any connectivity that they need. The cloud router is another thing that surprises customers when we talk about it. You don't need any hardware. We have people who are not even attached physically to our fabric, capable of connecting together disparate hyperscaler clouds using our cloud router product. There's no hardware on their point or anything like that. They go through one hosted interface into this logical router in our network, and at very high bandwidth, up to 100 gigabits per second right now, in between clouds. That just blows their mind that you can do that they didn't need to deploy any CPE, they didn't need to do it. So it's that engagement is getting beyond the, hey, it's getting beyond the cloud first thing into, hey, it's for your entire networking needs, and it brings all of these functions to it that you didn't think were there, all these capabilities integrated into our services.
Yeah.
So I think so Ken, riffing on that a bit, and Carole, maybe you can add to this. The number one question we frequently get is, so what's the difference between what you're saying and SD-WAN? And maybe you want to riff on that for a minute.
I'll give you the high level, and Ken, you give them the details. That's you can fill it in. So the obvious sort of positioning here is that for us, you know, as a private network provider, we can offer SD-WAN providers a better level of service, right? So we see the market as highly fractured. We see that as not necessarily our issue to solve, but one that we will certainly work with any SD-WAN provider who's interested in providing private services to their customers. So neither competitor nor necessarily partner, we're willing to work in the way that customers need us to work, and customers can ask that of their SD-WAN provider. Yeah, but in terms of the difference, Ken, let's talk about that a bit.
Well, we already see some converged SASE providers that have an SD-WAN component in their products, trying to move towards private connectivity for their customers to avoid some of the vagaries that are in public transport networks. We've seen a couple of vendors that have moved into this space. They're still overlays. They use public transit more or less. So they don't provide the granular per customer connectivity and controls that we provide on our network, since we can control all the way down to our hardware, down to the fiber on a per customer basis. But we are seeing some validation there. They're also moving to private peers with cloud providers instead of just using the public peers that were in the same IX location that they were, where they were aggregating broadband customers. That still is a public interface and doesn't do anything for their customers' cost, for instance. That still uses the VPN interfaces to the cloud, where they're paying the higher tonnage rates for their data egress. So there's a lot there that we can do with partners to help them provide private connectivity to their customers where it makes sense. Like I said, for some hybrid work, people will be using broadband from their home to get to the edge of a private network. And it's incumbent on us to help educate the customers of SD-WAN providers on the lower cost and the better performance of private, and how to get that with their SD-WAN or their SaaS provider.
It seems like the ethos of the company has been sort of leaning towards the more holistic, end-to-end, all-inclusive networking solution is what I've been hearing from everybody. There's a few questions that have been shot into the question chat here. And I'm going to read some of them. Being cloud-based, what happens to an on-prem network during outages? Ken, you want to take that?
It's, I'm trying to parse the question.
Right.
What happens to nothing happens to your on-prem network. Do you mean during an outage, an outage in our network? An outage in our network, it's a self-healing network. So you shouldn't even notice an outage in our network. We have multiple paths, multiple providers. We're a cloud native, so our interface to you and our operation is highly available. We operate on a hyperscaler cloud that has all of the availability that you can imagine an operation might have. We have tons of redundancy there. If you're talking about your premise, we stop at your premise. We stop we provide wide area networking. We don't provide LAN within your building or Wi-Fi. That's not our area of focus. So I can't parse the question in a way where our operation would affect your on-prem operation at all.
Right. Maybe if it was a pop on site or something like that, but.
I mean,
hey, Lisa, let's jump down to the third question, because that one's directly for you. And then we're going to come back to the second one, because that's a favorite one of mine.
PacketFabric, can you describe how the virtual studio in LA is using your service? I forget the name of the studio. The studio is Orbital Virtual Studios. They're located in downtown Los Angeles. They do have an on-premise POP, so we have effectively turned them into what we're calling a connected stage. So because Orbital has 2 stages within their state-of-the-art facility, they have a need for basically they have their own data center that has been built, and our equipment goes right on site. So we have turned their stage into one of our PacketFabric points of presence. They can reach the cloud, they can reach DIA, and they can have any production who comes in to use a stage make use of those services. They can be spun up and spun down. If they have a shoot that lasts a day, they can have connectivity. If they have something that's in there for longer, they have that connectivity as well. So it's sort of giving them a very automated, at their fingertips option to use the cloud and beyond right from the stage. And it's very exciting. So if you would like to hear more about that, I love to talk about it. Give me a call and we can discuss it.
In fact, Lisa, you even have a great white paper on that too. So hopefully you can drop that into the notes of the talk. Yeah. Also, just overall, we've got a number of recent blogs out there on the entire concept of edge to everywhere and where we're going with the 2 companies and platform. But let me grab the second question on define edge, and are there industry standards? I'm evolving the question that was actually asked. So for us, we're networking geeks. For us, the edge is the perimeter of a connectivity the perimeter of a topology of connectivity. Could be on-prem, could be to the edge of a private data center. For us, the edge is really defined topologically. Practically, what we're talking about is getting on-prem into an enterprise or the end of an access circuit in practice. So there is no real industry standard. It's the networking industry and telecommunications industry loves to glom onto terms without actually defining them, and certainly then attempts to apply standards. As we know, people have talked about edge clouds, which are really just compute in, let's say, a head end of a cable co, or as the case might be. But nonetheless, the overall interesting piece of this is really on the standards piece. There may be marketing terms that get glommed onto and morphed and then need to be teased apart, like software-defined networking that's happened to that term, as well as what Carole and Ken have described with NaaS. But really, a number of failings have been in standards bodies and in open source, because there has been no work whatsoever to describe the functionality or define the functionality, architecture, or use cases. Now, this also gave rise to both Unitas and PacketFabric. The founders, the original engineers, folks on this call, myself, had been working in trying to create software-defined networking, and it had gone through the controller wars of the early 2010s or the 20-teens, had gone through protocol wars of open flows and various other FUBARs that were put onto the industry. Where we've evolved to as network as a service is none of that matters. And because none of that matters, because frankly, they're the wrong design patterns. Network as a service is not a religion about protocols. We don't care. We love them all. Network as a service is not about which controller you use or which architecture you're stuck with, because we don't use them. Instead, this is a ground up, cloud native, scale out design using modern design patterns, fundamentally getting away from the software design snake pit traps or bear traps, sorry for the mixed metaphor, that existed through those efforts and through that era. And so what we're really trying to define here is not only a way of providing connectivity, and we've really talked a lot about networks and topologies and actual connectivity, but I think what's fascinating about PacketFabric and the two companies coming together are really the software design patterns and the technology that's been created to solve this particular problem through these platforms. Because it did take the era of the protocol wars and the controller wars and the rest of it to realize that those design patterns cannot create a programmable internet for businesses. It actually required a ground up difference in design. So as much as there's no industry standards around the terms, and they're often misused or misappropriated terms that others are trying to use to their own benefit, really the notion here of all the things glomming onto NaaS are those potentially who were caught in an older era of design patterns trying to catch up. And we see this by telcos, cablecos, and various other long-standing legacy startups trying to now capture onto this, all the way to system integrators and vendors who are trying to do gear as a service, as network as a service, which it's not providing a network, it's providing bundled gear. My point being is that looking to answers in the standard bodies, open source, is not going to solve the problem, because they're just too far behind at this point. And in fact, what's emerged are the technology design patterns in software represented through connectivity to prove itself. And that's really what PacketFabric and Unitas coming together truly means. It's just completely leapfrogging all of those design patterns and all of those legacy wars over protocols, controllers, and various other FUBARs that really just aren't going to solve problems. I have more to say on this. In fact, in a very short 28-page blog that I posted to our website, and I do hope folks get a chance to take a look at that. On the TruNaaS part, Ken posted an interesting blog that he wrote in with Carole as well on defining these pieces. And we're going to continue to be pushing out what our definition is and what we mean by it, because we can't stand on the work from the past. Using yesterday's technology to solve tomorrow's problems rarely is a good path forward. And so we decided not to do that and build all these platforms from scratch, ground up. Sorry, I think I got excited.
No, I think, on that note from our CEO, I think that is a perfect note to close, unless anyone has other thoughts. And I will put this slide up here. This is how you get in touch with us. This is how you read more. And thank you all for coming. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you, Dave, Carole, Ken, for being here. And I hope to talk.
And thank you, Lisa.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a joy. All right. Have a great day.